So I guess we will get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast of and for the people, the greatest football podcast on earth, Realfrancamente. My name's Franca. I'm your host, and I'm so grateful for each and every one of you. Are you ready to bias your football content? Let's go. Hello. Oh my God. Welcome to our first episode of 2024. Can you believe it? We've made it to our second year of existence. What an accomplishment. Our consistency was off the charts. We've been reflecting on our first year of existence with those recap episodes. Check them out if you haven't, because they're so good. So much work went into it. Literally obsessed with us, our whole team. The whole team is winning. The whole team is winning. Amazing stuff. I'm so happy. I'm so raring to go to start this second year with all of the knowledge and experience I've gained from now being an established Latina podcaster. Okay. Hello. A lot of times when I'm like feeling down and stuff, I'll say things like, oh, whatever, like this isn't a big deal. Anyone could do it. You know what? No, anyone couldn't do it, because if they could, they would. And the reality is that it takes a lot of work on every end, and it takes support, and it takes having a presence on, on camera, on whatever, on audio, being able to riff. Like, it's actually a lot of work. And I was reflecting on it while I was, going through like all the episodes from last year and doing, all the stuff for the recap episode, and just in general, in terms of content too, like how much amazing, incredible content came out of me being able to have this space to just talk. So much of my life philosophy came out. So much of my my whole, philosophy for work, for everything I do, really was formed on this podcast. The most notable of which, example, if you watched my live that I did at the end of the year, you heard this, but was literally one of the episodes early on. I said a quote that also was a clip that then became the quote that was on my t-shirt for my TED Talk. Like almost a year later. So, which is that intersectionality, identity politics without intersectionality is nothing. The initial quote was, identity politics without intersectionality is bullshit. But I thought I should change it up a little bit for the regular, like normie consumer. So you heard it here first. But just it's just incredible that there's so much so much incredible stuff that went into this podcast. I'm in awe. I love it. I love it so much. I love us all. And I'm so grateful to be able to continue to do this because I have the most supportive team on earth. And what am I wearing today? It's not a kit, y'all. It is not a kit. We have a new swag alert. New Real Francamente swag alert. Oh, if you're watching on YouTube, you can like kind of see it. I know I'm like, I'll talk about the set in a second, which is non-existent, but I'm like working with what I have. So you might not be able to see it the whole time, but look at that Real Francamente full color crest right there in the middle. We've got a social media handle on the sleeve on the left, of course, as we always, live. That's where we live. We live on the left. And yeah, and I'm so excited to have these t-shirts. They're for VIPs at this point, and some folks are already interested in purchasing. So I'm gonna reach out to y'all, let y'all know what I have. This was kind of a test run, but it's already been successful on social. So I'm so excited. I'm so excited for these t-shirts. I'm excited for the future of Real Francamente. I'm excited for today. I'm excited to be reinvigorated, towards the end of the year. And a lot of the episodes I mentioned, we had that Sad Girl like FC episode. I was kind of like down, and, I had been saying like, oh, I don't know if I'm like really super into football anymore. Like, no, that's not true. Of course, I was always super into football, but I've recently again like refound that like passion for not only watching football, but like getting this out there for y'all, like getting all this stuff out there, and like just sharing all these analyses and thoughts and everything like that. So we've got a lot of content for today. We're gonna get through what we get through, and then a lot of it is topical in terms of time, and a lot of it is more timeless. So we're gonna do we'll call this an intro to 2024 episode. If there's a tying thread, it might be related to mental health, actually. So there's one thing I want to talk about with that. And then we'll see how we tie in all the rest of the stuff. But there's so much that's been going on. We've been watching the Copa del Rey, we've been watching the FA Cup, we've been watching different cups around the world. We've been watching things happen off the pitch in terms of like transfers and things that are not so good, all that fun stuff. So we'll get started. We don't have a set per se. We've got blank wall set today. And that's okay. I'm recording at my parents' house and there's construction going on. So I'm in transition, I'm moving and all that stuff. So a lot of my stuff's in storage, some of my stuff is here, but there's construction going on in the basement where my stuff is. And so we're working with it. I wanted to have like a little, at least a ball, but like I just could not. You know what? It's fine. It's all fine. The theme of this whole thing is that we're rolling with the punches. Everything is fine. Everything is fine. Like that meme of that dog where everything's on fire. That's us. But it's all good. It is all good. So yeah, so let's start. Okay, so I want to start with, because you know what, this does tie into the mental health thing. I want to start with talking about the ridiculous Premier League schedule over the holidays. Okay. And why am I starting with this? Because as much as I love, and we haven't had a content episode in a while, so really like we are talking back to like even like Boxing Day, right? Festive fixtures, that whole period in Premier League, right? At one point, teams start to play twice a week for the league, right? And there were games every day, which is good for us, right? The viewers, in terms of like, consuming football. But there's something to be said here. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit as it pertains to players' mental health, but there's something to be said here about the capitalist, like, consumption obsession of doing these festive fixtures, right? So now you've got teams playing twice a week for to get all these games in, right? They don't get a break for any single holiday, right? And this is where you really see that difference in money. So I talk a lot about how we need to blame the system and not the people, right? So a lot of people will bash like Manchester City for having all the money, or like the big teams for having all the money, and the discrepancies and all the unfair, distribution of money. Big teams get tons of money, small teams get little money, and they always, the bottom three are always pretty much the same. Like that whole thing, it's all very fair. It's true. Like I think there should be no money in football at all, right? Like that's the bottom line. There should be no money in football at all. Money ruined everything. Capitalism ruined everything. All of that aside, this is where you really see. And so I don't want to ever blame people, right? We want to blame the system. So we're not like, oh, it's Pep's fault. Like people love to hate Pep, or people love to hate Manchester City because they're like, well, they have all the money, they should win every single game. That's not how sports work, for starters. All of this aside, okay, the festive fixtures period is really where you see that injustice. And here's what I'm talking about, right? There was a time right before the festive fixture started where the Premier League at the top was like shifting every single game. They were within like such small point differences. It was like Liverpool on top, Arsenal on top, Manchester City. Then Manchester City was fourth at one time. There was a lot of movement at the top. That's so exciting, right? Festive fixtures comes. Now you've got teams that Manchester City, looking at you, okay, that can afford to have 2.5, okay, good squads. What do I mean? If you have to sit, if injuries happen, if whatever happened, and the entire first squad had to sit, your second squad is still good enough to win games in Premier League. And that comes from money. And that's where you see that injustice of like the hoarding of these players. That's where you see that's where we can actually talk about this, right? Because we have to be careful when we talk about players making so much money. So we can't feel bad for them because they're so rich. Well, there's a whole thing, okay? And we're going to talk about actually Thierry Henry as it pertains to this in a little bit. There's a whole thing with like they're still human beings, okay? They're still like being treated like machines, but they're human beings, and who decides how much they get paid, all that stuff. But this is where you see when you have a team that can field 2.5 top flight squads easy, okay? And then you've got other teams where if one player gets injured, and it sucks when a team is dependent on just one player, okay? But you've got one player gets injured, that could be their whole season. And what's happening when they're playing? Oh my gosh, we got a thumbs up from the software. I don't know what's going on. That happened one time, other time before. I don't know what that was. Watch on YouTube if you aren't. So when you've got a team and they can feel so okay, so teams that are dependent on one player, right? That player gets injured, they're done. And what is happening when they're playing twice a week, okay? And then they're playing for like other cups and everything like that. It's bound to happen. They're humans. They're not machines. You get an injury on Manchester City, no problem. You've got 3 players behind them that you can field versus teams that don't have that privilege. And that's where we see that inequity truly playing out because we have to be really careful and there needs to be nuance in the way that we talk about the money that these teams have. Okay. But it gets really boring and unfair when there's really a chance for teams to win the league. Arsenal looking at you. I was waiting again this season. Okay. We're still there. It's still not over, but then you get to this stretch of time where they're playing incessantly. They don't even get breaks for Christmas Day, okay? And then a lot of the teams, and then what do? Like it could cost a team their season, okay? When you're playing so often that these human beings just can't keep up. And so that's where I really think that the money thing really comes into play, right? That we can really have that discussion. And there's some people that are really irrational and will like always just be like, okay, well, the team with the most money, blah, blah, blah. And like, we hate them. It's not really like that because, again, one thing I've said consistently throughout my entire time on this podcast is like, we're all complicit, right? So we can't be black and white about it in terms of being like, well, I'm holier than thou because I hate the richest team and I like the poorest team. It doesn't like we're all complicit. There's no team that's not complicit in corrupt money. That's just how it works under capitalism, right? And so we have to have that nuance, but at the same time, we can definitely criticize and critique and have these nuanced discussions about what that does to smaller teams on a material level, on a level where like it could literally cost someone their season. Okay. When we've got these teams that have enough to just buy players, however much they want. So that was a thing that I was thinking about. That's one of those things where I was like, I was enjoying so much having so much football to watch too. And at the same time, I was like, damn, it sucks that, that you've got these teams dropping points because they're just exhausted. They're just exhausted. I mean, it's common sense, right? You're playing them to the bone. And that is really unique to Premier League. Like other leagues, the major leagues really do get breaks for Christmas and New Year's. And then they kind of ease into their season with with their country's cups, like Copa del Rey and FA Cup. But England, I don't know. Do we need to revisit these festive fixtures? I know there was a time before capitalism, before modern football, where it made sense to do this because it wasn't as like demanding. It was like, oh, Boxing Day matches, like it's cool. It's like a time where everyone's home, everyone's watching football. It's like wholesome, right? And that's the beginnings of what this was. But as it's like what it's become recently, I don't know. I don't know if we need to be revisiting the purpose, right, of what we're doing here with these expectations of these players that are ultimately just human, right? With that, we'll talk a little bit about the FA Cup and the Copa del Rey. I've been watching like quite a few of those games. And I am so well, first of all, okay, before we get to FA Cup, let me switch to La Liga for a little bit, okay? Because this will be related to Copa del Rey. and then it'll be related to FA Cup, and there you have your strand of right of connection. Um, is this? I'm posing a question out to my fans. Okay, is this La Liga's season of the small club? Is this the season of the small club? I was watching the Girona versus Atletico game, okay, Atletico Madrid, and that game was so good. Girona, I mean, like, okay, so small clubs playing everywhere, beating big teams. Let's not look. I'm a Barcelona fan, okay? My team is in shambles. My team is in absolute shambles to the point where I have to laugh. I have to laugh because I can't. I and again, who do we blame for this? People are blaming Xavi. I don't think it's Xavi. I think there's so many like issues there. All of this to say, Girona beat Atletico, right? This is for the league. Um, and as much as I love El Cholo Simeone so much, shouts to our original daddy, okay? Um, that made me so it makes me so happy to see smaller teams win, and it doesn't happen often in La Liga, okay? And there was a beautiful moment, and it just this is I think what really sparked this inspiration in me to be like, no, this is what this is what we've been about on this podcast, right? Where one of the pundits after the game was analyzing the game, the Girona Atletico game, and he said a beautiful quote, which is, this is what will save football. This is what will save football. And that, if it like, look, is it a little bit idealistic? Yeah, sure. Because realistically, are we going to save football unless we have a whole revolution? Not really. But what have we always said? We look for those moments. This was so Galliano-esque, that quote, this is what will save football. We look for those moments of joy. And I was watching ESPN in Espanol, and so I don't remember who it actually was. But these are those little pockets of joy, those little moments that bring us back to the inception of football, to the birth of football as the democratizing sport in the world, right? These are those pockets, those moments where we're like, there's still that magic, right? There's still that magic. I've started dabbling in using Threads, the Instagram the Instagram app. So at realfrancamente, you're following me on Instagram, follow me on Threads. And I threaded, I don't know what you, it's not, I'm treating it like Twitter, okay? I'm treating it like Twitter. So I'm like, I tweeted on Threads, okay? Something that this is so niche, and I don't even know if one single one of my followers, of my listeners, will get this or like understand this reference. But there was a time when there was a show on in Argentina. Well, I mean, the guy is still on, Tinelli, Marcelo Tinelli. He's been hosting ridiculous TV, reality TV before reality TV existed. Actually, I should do a deep dive on this because this has been around since like the 80s, okay, since I was in Uruguay. And it was, for all intents and purposes, reality TV. So let me put this in my mental bank for popular culture reasons, not football reasons. Anyway, there is a connection because Marcelo Tinelli is a big San Lorenzo fan. For a while, I think he was the president of the club and everything. Okay. So he's been doing ridiculous TV. It was misogynist at one point. It was like, it has not aged well, okay? But it's one of those things that is kind of like part of the psyche of all Rio Platenses, right? Argentinians, Uruguayans, were these like comedians that were on this show that has been called different things. It's always like Tinelli. Everyone just calls it Tinelli, and like whatever the show's called doesn't matter. Currently, he's hosting the Argentinian version of Dancing with the Stars, okay? That's what he's doing now. Anyway, Marcelo Tinelli had these hilarious comedians on. One was Uruguayan, and he would have this ridiculous voice to do these bits. And one of the things that he said a bunch was, "El amor es mágico." but he would pronounce it like that, like mágique, not mágico, right? Es mágique. And then it became a meme. Again, before memes were really, really a thing. Remember early core, like internet? Like it was even before that these things existed, right? In Argentina and Uruguay. So el amor es mágique, and you spell it like that, which really would be mágico, right? But because his voice was so ridiculous. So I tweeted on Threads that el fútbol es mágique, and I spelled it just like that as like a meme. I don't know if one single person that is not Argentinian would ever get that joke. All of this to say that el fútbol es mágique. Okay, el fútbol es mágique. Like you, and this is where we see, okay, that magic, that beauty, that like essence of what football is and was, is in the moments where Girona's beating up Atletico, in the moments where Barcelona is going through a crisis, because as a fan, that breaks my heart and I hate it so, so much. And as a fan of the essence of football, what a more beautiful thing to happen to La Liga than for these small teams. Okay, and when I say small, I mean teams that have not won the league in a very long time, right? And like and because Spain is more of like a two teams at the top league than maybe Premier League is, it's notable. It's notable. So we're gonna keep an eye on that table. But like it was just so beautiful to see that, even if it's just for that one game, and like even the pundits, everyone was so excited to be like, this is it. This is what we do this for. And that's where you see the difference between United Station or even English, pundits, commentators, where they're so imperialist in their thought, right? That you rarely see an English speaking pundit make these connections. And I won't say never, because there's a few that do like call these moments out, but it's so rare. And definitely no United Stations do, right? Like in terms of like those like moments of like the essence of when you remove all the capitalism, all the colonialism, all the imperialism, all the bullshit, right? Then you're left with this essence of this sport that unites us all, that at one time was like the thing, right? It was like the thing. It's the democratizing sport, and it's so much more than a sport, right? So it's just so beautiful to have those moments, and La Liga, that was beautiful, man. That was beautiful. With that, I think we'll go to a little break. And then we'll come back and talk some more about, I'm so excited. I'm loving this episode already. Talk some more about, maybe we'll weave in La Copa del Rey after this. We'll talk about FA Cup. We'll talk about Thierry Henry. There's so much. There's so much. We'll see you in a bit.
Make sure to follow and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. And help us out by leaving a rating and review, and remember to share it with a friend. Don't forget to follow Franca on Twitter and Instagram at realfrancamente for the latest news. And lastly, please visit realfrancamente.com for bonus content, including articles, photos, and for more information about the podcast.
Okay, and we're back. We are back. So we're talking about the beauty, right? These moments of magic that can happen in football that remind us that football is beautiful. Right? Football is beautiful in its inception. This is what decolonizing the sport is all about too, right? Obviously, decolonizing is what we do every single episode when we talk about all of the things we talk about. And again, doing the recap episodes like remind me of how much variety of content there is. Even if you don't love football, there's always something, right? We've talked intersectionality, racism, sexism, misogyny, transphobia, homophobia, like so much stuff, so much stuff. That's decolonizing. And decolonizing is also looking at the ways that we can interact with football as fans of the sport for the essence of it, right? So we're talking about these moments, and I think another thing that for those of us who are big fans, another thing that is kind of like a beautiful phenomenon, right, is the FA Cup and the Copa del Rey, right? And like for me, both of those, so the FA Cup and the Copa del Rey are both the same. They're cups in which any team that is recognized, right, by FIFA, and like that could be obviously like top flight, second division, down to like your Sunday league. Like like you really like see so much diversity of teams, of stadia, of of like all of it, and it's just so beautiful. I love the first rounds, especially of these cups, of FA Cup, of Copa del Rey, because you see some like beautiful stuff. So, first of all, it's interesting that in FA Cup, every single big team in England is playing small teams, and Arsenal got Liverpool. Which is such a shame because it's like that's like one of those luck of the draw things, right? Where it's like Arsenal probably could have made it a little farther in the cup if they hadn't drawn Liverpool right so early. But other than that, it's like they're all playing these small teams. When Luton Town came up, my boyhood club Luton, when my boyhood club Luton Town came up, that was the excitement. It was like this is a team that's worked their way up, and you literally have to walk through people's gardens to get to their pitch. And Manchester United was going to play them, and these big teams are going to have to play in a stadium where you have to walk through people's garden. Like that is football, right? That's the essence. That is the beauty. That's that magia, right? Es mágique. And that's what you see in the FA Cup, and that's what you see in the Copa del Rey. And I cannot I can't I would be remiss if I did not mention the papelon. How do we say papelon in English? I don't know. It's like the disaster, the like embarrassment that Barcelona just went through. The papelon, okay, that Barcelona just went through, the embarrassment, okay, that Barcelona just went through in the Copa del Rey when they barely beat Barbastro, okay, which is a team that I don't even know, like their stadium. It was the sweetest thing. First of all, watching that game was so sweet, and even though I'm a Barcelona fan, it's it was beautiful. Barcelona played Barbastro, and this team is so little. It's a team that literally like their fan. First of all, the pitch was like it was like worse than a high school pitch would be in the United States, and I say that in like such a good, like prideful way. Like it's such like a tiny stadium. The fans there, okay, were wearing, like many of the fans were wearing like their team scarves and also Barcelona scarves, and they had like Barcelona, jerseys and things for the players to sign. For Barbastro and Barcelona, by the way. And Barbastro is not even in the second division. I think they're third or below. I don't actually remember which division they're in. Okay, they're not like, they're certainly like, here's the piece that I think is magic about this, okay? Those fans got to go watch their team play against Barcelona and score against Barcelona. And literally, if that game had gone on for 10 more minutes, I think they had a chance to tie it back up or even beat Barcelona. Barcelona's in shambles, right? Imagine those players scoring on Barcelona will never, ever, ever forget that moment in their life. That's where you see that magic of football, because that's the thing about being a massive club. That's the thing about being a Barcelona, about being a Manchester United, right? Like it's everyone's dream. And if you're a team that does not have, the realistic, expectation that you'll ever make it to La Liga, that's where the Copa del Rey is so magical, because you have these clashes, right? You play Barcelona, you play like these big teams that you've watched on TV your whole life, right? And you get to score on them at your home on top of that, right? There's such a moment of, I almost want to call it equity. Of course, it isn't equity because we've still got the money thing, like all this stuff. Excuse me, the colonialism, all that stuff is still there, right? But there is an element at these cups, and it happens at the FA Cup too, of like that like almost like the sport as like the equalizer, right? People who have dreamt their whole lives of playing Barcelona, of playing, in these big in these big clubs, and obviously it's virtually impossible to make it, right? When we look at the statistics of the players that make it to top flight, let alone these big teams, we know, right, realistically, that like someone who plays for Radvastro knew very early on in their life that it's awesome to play, in that capacity, but that's probably like the highest that you'll get, right, for most of them. And one time a year you get to have, if you're lucky and if you get the draw right correctly, you get to cross paths with Barcelona FC and play them in your home. And then you saw all the fans, like obviously, like every single time they scored, it was like they won the league, right? Because you're scoring on Barcelona at your own home. And even though they had obviously their own team stuff, they also are like, they take this opportunity, right? Like to get their stuff signed, to meet like these big players. I mean, I really, really enjoy these cups. I enjoy those moments of like, it's another like peek into what we could have if we really wanted it, right? Like what football really could be if we really wanted um to get there, to make it more equitable. Like, is that, um idealistic of me? Yeah. Is that, whatever? Like, I'm not Delulu. I'm Delulu. I'm Delulu, but I am conscious about it. Does that make sense? Like, I'm Delulu, but but I also, I can call myself out. I can see what I'm doing, and I allow myself to have those moments, because otherwise I would redact it, right? Like, because otherwise, like, what are we doing here if we can't look at those moments and like truly say, like, this is football, right? This is football. This is el fútbol es mágico, right? Like, these are those moments where you're like, oh, like, this is why I do this. This is why I love the sport so much. This is why I watch. This is why I can't let go. This is why, as much as we should be boycotting FIFA and all of the shit, it's in our blood. It's in our blood. How much more Galliano-esque could you get, right? Than this. I don't know. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I can't wait to see what transpires as these cups continue. Love it so much. What's going to be our bridge here? Okay, so I want to talk about two players that my team in England, Manchester United, has ruined. Um, I am in shambles today because it was actually just announced like that, like Sancho, whom I was so excited. Jadon Sancho coming to Manchester United, I was so excited. I was like, yes, like he was killing it, before, like he's coming here. And then the other one is Facundo Pellistri. Beautiful head of hair, by the way, on that man. If you haven't, check it out. He's a kid. Uruguayan, okay? Facundo Pellistri and Jadon Sancho, two players with so much potential that came to my team to be fucking killed, okay? Their whole shit ruined by the bald man in charge, that is Ten Hag, whom you'll recall I hate so much. Okay. So Palistri has so much potential. And like with him, I think there's still a chance. There's a couple teams that, that like maybe he'll like go on loan and all that stuff. Which is so Palistri being ruined by Ten Hag is bad for me tenfold. Like, it's bad for Manchester United and it's also bad for Uruguay. obviously, like, and Bielsa, right? Like, we need him playing because he's a great player, and we need him to develop so that he can do awesome stuff for Uruguay, right? Thank you, Ten Hag, for ruining my whole life and offending all my ancestors, um, personally. And then Jaden Sancho announced today. I'm so pissed. I'm so pissed at that man's potential. This is where we can blame a man, one single man, and it's Eric Ten Hag. Now, yes, Manchester United as an organization sucks. Manchester United as a brand sucks. I fucking hate the fact that it's a brand, that it's a marketing scheme anymore, right? But with all this said, we could have a respectable manager that isn't a fucking asshole, like ignorant idiot who doesn't know how to coach fucking superstars. Okay. And that's what he is. And that's what he is. And I'm done with it. I'm so done with it because these are the types of things that later come out, right? Years later, where players come out and they're like, because it's happened, because Jay Ling's, okay, another one of my boos, like Jesse Lingard has been open. Deli Ali has been open about how much pressure it is, right? And then you add terrible managers, and then you add managers with like personal, like, what's the word, like personal like vendettas, right? Against certain players. And I wouldn't be surprised if it came out that Jadon Sancho went through hell. And I can't wait till that comes out. Okay. When we get like, some sort of like expose piece on the way this shit has affected them mentally. Um, which, speaking of which, another thing that was on the docket was talking about my man Thierry Henry. My man Thierry Henry. Okay, like if my number one boo, my number one bay in football, like the sexiest man, whom I like, just all around, like, there's other men in football that I love conditionally. El Cholo Simeone is one of them. I love him so much physically, but he's a fucking asshole. Like he's such like he's trash, right? Like as a human, he's so misogynist. But like Thierry Henry's the whole package, right? He's sexy, he's hot, he's like, so, I mean, one of the most talented players in the history of the sport. He's funny. He's fucking hilarious. I love that man. I love that man. There is not anything I wouldn't do. Okay. And I'll leave it at that. But I love him so much. And so he's been doing, it is interesting because when things like this come out, so it came out that he was on a podcast and he was talking about his mental health and how, without knowing the terminology for it, he definitely has gone through periods of depression while playing. And he used the word depression while playing. And also he said he spent almost every day of the pandemic crying. And like, he was so open. And for someone, first of all, look at how far removed he is from his playing days. So we can speak to how hard it is for people still to come forward. Look at what happens when people come forward while they still have the chance to play. Dele Alli. What happened to Dele Alli? He came out, he talked about mental health. Jay Lings also talked about mental health, issues. And where are they now? Neither of them, right? Like are it's like their career dropped off, and it coincided with them coming out. Is there an argument to be made for them maybe choosing to step back? Maybe, but both of them were in their prime, right? And so we can talk about the stigma and how much more it means for someone like the legend, the worldwide legend that is Thierry Henry, all jokes aside about how hot he is, okay? Coming out to now be able to speak as far removed as he is from playing, right? And luck, I really, and he's still coaching, and I really, really hope his time coaching at Montreal, I almost loved more. No, let me not. Like, I didn't love it more than his time at Red Bulls. That was our glory period. But like, I loved to watch him on the sidelines for Montreal. I thought that was a great job for him. I hope he continues, and he's doing obviously like awesome, punditry and like commentary on CBS Sports with Champions League, which shouts to that team. It's hilarious. I love Micah and Kate, and like, I just love watching their little antics. And one thing I love so much about Thierry is that when they're being fucking ridiculous on that show, he just says nothing. He's like, I can't be bothered. I'm here to be serious and talk about the sport. It's fucking hilarious. I love the dynamic. But anyway, all of that, to say that I really hope that Thierry opening up about this makes us all a little bit more aware of like how to talk about these human beings, right? Because this all pertains to full circle when we were talking about the beginning with the money, right? And we're like, oh, they're billionaires, they could handle it. They're millionaires, they could handle it. Yes, obviously, money makes a lot of things easier, namely access, right? Access to resources for sure. But when you're in such like a pressure cooker, because these people have so much stacked against them, right? They've got the fact that toxic masculinity says that if they speak out about it, it's like it's way more stigmatized for men to speak out about mental health. And especially in those positions of like, power and like when you're an athlete and all that stuff, right? And on top of that, you're playing a sport, and so you're supposed to be like this model person. You're supposed to. One of the things Thierry said in that interview was like, everyone just says like, "Oh, shut up and dribble," or you're just like supposed to shut up and take it because like you live this privileged life, right? And like that doesn't mean that mental health goes away. And so there's just so much. I think it's a can of worms in a good way to open up to talk about all of this stuff and how it affects these people that are again like human beings, right? Like, and I'm so glad and proud of Thierry for coming out and speaking out about this. Hopefully that helps situations like the Deli Alleys, like the Jay Lingses of the world, to like feel a little bit more comfortable, to not be as stigmatized, to not be as like um ostracized, right? Because it's normal. All of us like look, I went through, if you listen to my episodes from the beginning to the end of last year, like towards the end, I was going through it. I was going through it. I went through a lot, right? Last year was crazy for me in many, many ways. There were a lot of ups and also a lot of downs. And that's just life, right? That's just life. And so part of the reason why I talk about it myself in this very small, position that I have with a little bit of a platform or whatever is because people really do see that as it's representation, right? Ultimately, it's like we tend to put people on pedestals, and I do this in my classroom as well, right? I disclose things to my students about like not, like I'll talk about like how I have ADHD, how I'm like, like I have all these, I have anxiety. And so like I understand what they're going through, and students react really well to that. I've had students be like, wow, this is the first time I've ever felt like I could understand a class. Like your teaching style speaks to my ADHD, like that kind of stuff. And like where they've never felt comfortable to even like disclose something like that to a professor, right? Those types of things. And it's the same thing here. I'm like, I'm always open because I know that it can look like on social media, it can look like when we put these people that like, it's like, oh, that's my professor. That's, this person of authority or whatever. They're perfect. Their life is so great. They're like this, whatever. And like, that's just not true for any of us, right? It's not true for any of us. And I think being more open about it instead of fake, and that's where Real comes in, right? Is so important. It's so much like that's why we have to take something like this Thierry moment and be so vocally supportive about it, because more of this, please. More of this, please. I think this is one of those ways where we can really, you know, one of those times, one of those spaces where we can really push to decolonize in a different way than in the maybe calling it political sense if we want to, like the other stuff, even though this is obviously everything's politics. But what a moment for someone like Thierry Henry, right? And this is when you look back and you're like, you knew, like there were times where he, like why, when he left Montreal, like that was such a great fit. Like what was that? Why, and it wasn't. It's one thing to get sacked, right? It's one thing to get fired, and it's one thing to like kind of make it mutual or like maybe leave on your own. And we'll never know the real reasons, right? Someone leaves a job. This is ultimately it's a job, right? But there's definitely things that looking back, you can be like, damn, I wish we lived in a society where he would have felt comfortable talking about it while it was happening, right? And I'm glad that it's happening now because he's still very much in the spotlight. He's still very much, young and doing the thing. So shouts to our collective man, Thierry Henry. Incredible stuff. More of that, especially in the men's football space, right? Because we need it. We need this is all connected, obviously, to like rape culture and all that stuff, and like all of the ways that we talk about players, supporting players when there's allegations and all that stuff. Like this is all related, right? Like everything is, by the way, rooted in colonialism, misogyny, white supremacy. Like all of these things are connected, right? Like all of these things are connected. So bringing this to the forefront can only literally help all of us. So shouts to Thierry and this last so I can't I would be remiss again if I didn't at least mention this towards the end of this episode today, which is that, and we'll end on a good note, right? Which is that AFCON is starting, like the African Cup is starting, and I am obsessed. I'm obsessed with every piece of content that's come out around this. Okay, there was an awesome post by Versus on Instagram, and I think they're also on Twitter. But let me pull it up because it's so good. And so they I love Versus, by the way. It's just at Versus on Instagram. Their like headline thing for their slideshow was AFCON is proof that Africa doesn't need the rest of the world to thrive, which I love so much. They don't give a fuck, right? They don't give a fuck. So there's arguments to be made for people who are like, oh, Africa Cup of Nations, it's like in this off season and it's selfish. They're taking our players, blah blah whatever. And they're like, and the whole thing is, the philosophy behind it is that AFCON exists to highlight African football, right? Not to like care about your league or your whatever. So like we're gonna do whatever the fuck we want. That's the basic gist of the little article that they posted in a slideshow. And the whole thing about AFCON that's awesome too is that it was established like in the 1950s when Europe, this is a quote, Europe, they say on Versus, they didn't care about African football. Okay, literally. And like that's a quote. But yes, I mean like 100%. We've talked so much about how and Premier League is the worst with this. They were the last, okay, to take any foreign players, let alone especially African players, right? And it was only when foreign players come to these European leagues that their football gets good. Okay, that's a whole thing. But what a win for the global South to have a cup that just is so unapologetic. About we're gonna do our own thing, like the joy in some of the teams. There was another post by Black Arrow, and it was all of the Ghanaian players. Black Arrow also on Instagram, it's Black Arrow underscore FC. Okay. And they had pictures of all the Ghanaian players arriving in their kente cloth like outfits, and I just think it's so, like, being so unapologetically authentically yourselves. Like, we're not appropriating here, right? Like, we're not doing any of that. Like, they're just unapologetically themselves. Like, that is their own culture. And there was a time, where they might have not felt, super safe to do that. And like, and I'm so glad that, and the Ghana fans, at whenever they make it to World Cups, they're always like amazing to watch, like at World Cups. But this is like the actual players. And it's so good. Ivory Coast to Cote d'Ivoire is where it is being, where they're all kind of like convening. And I'm so excited. It starts this weekend. By the time this drops, we will have had some games. But there's so much like, awesome hype around this, and I'm so glad that it's getting like its due, props, this cup, because it's for me, it goes, obviously, like there's the World Cup, but like obviously Copa America is it, right? Like Copa America is like the most, what's the word? Like the most prestigious, like blah blah whatever. But like I don't even care about the European Cup. Like I'm like global South supremacy. Okay, we're ranking Copa America, and then right underneath that is AFCON. And I'm so excited to watch teams like, yeah, like Cote d'Ivoire, like Ghana, like Nigeria, like, and I don't even, I'm not even gonna like, I'm like, if we're rooting for Black Africa unapologetically. Okay, we're not like, I get it. There's Salah, there's Egypt, like Morocco is exciting, all that stuff, but like, I am sorry, I'm rooting for Black Africa above all else. And looking for these teams to thrive. So we'll see. We're gonna report back on what goes on with AFCON, and that'll be our excitement. There's actually a lot of international tournaments this year. Copa America is unfortunately coming here to the US. We will probably attend games, but we will hate every second of it in terms of it being here. But there's like there's so much football. There's so much international football. I love it so much. So yeah, so let's watch some AFCON. Let's let's interact. Let me know. Let me know what you think of some of these topical things we talked about today. Let me know if you want what you want to see more of this year, this brand new year that we're starting. And let me know if you want some Real Francamente swag. I'll see you on the next one. And that was another episode of Real Francamente. Thank you so much for listening. I'm literally obsessed with y'all. Please share with your like-minded friends. Follow us on socials at Real Francamente. Leave likes, comments. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on YouTube. Leave comments, leave ratings, leave reviews, only if you love us. Like our videos on YouTube too, that helps. Check out our website for more content, www.realfrancamente.com. We'll catch you on the next one. And as always, buy us your football content.